Hi, I'm Griff Hamlin. Welcome and thanks for joining me today. Over the next several minutes, I want to talk about your blues licks, and more specifically, the elements of blues licks that you may be ignoring in your playing, and why you can't afford to keep ignoring them any longer. Now, this all stems from feedback that I've received from you lately. If you happen to fill out one of the surveys I sent out, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And you told me loud and clear that the single biggest problem facing our blues guitar playing community today is the ability to be able to improvise, to make up a blues solo when you jam and do it well. And, to not make a fool of yourself is what many people said. So that got me thinking, of course, about all the courses that I have available, all the lessons, all the free videos, and all the other courses and videos available out there online, even ones I didn't make. And I couldn't help but wonder, why is this a problem? I mean, with so much information out there, what's the holdup? So for quite a while, like weeks, not just a few hours, I really hunkered down in my office trying to figure this out. And, why is it that if you've learned a bunch of solos and a bunch of licks, that you wouldn't be able to put those into some solos for yourself? And you may very well have asked yourself the same question. And I even went so far as to talk to, many other guitar players I know and other musicians, not guitar players, about it, and get their insights into soloing and how they sort of make that leap. Because as you know, I like systems, I like methods, and I like step-by-step plans that are, as I call it, guaranteed to work, right? And it's because of that I like to come up with rules, things like, never start a lick on beat one. That's always going to work. And then there's, I have courses like the Blues Solo Construction Kit that allow you to, plug and play licks together to create solos that, again, are guaranteed to work. So with all of the research and hammering out all these different ideas, I came to the realization that more than likely you're not learning your licks the right way. And more importantly, you're not fully assimilating the licks that you learn, okay? What I see more often than not is that you might learn a lick and play it a bunch of times, but then you sort of abandon it when it doesn't fit right in with the other stuff you're doing. Okay, there's no method to getting the lick from your brain to your fingers. In other words, when you're trying to solo, you're concentrating way too much on how to play the licks and to fit them in. And that doesn't leave you enough brain power left over to really step back and decide what might actually sound good. So today, we're going to cover what I call the 4 qualities of a lick and how you can determine those 4 qualities. And we're going to go through some example licks and figure out what the 4 qualities are for all of the licks. Now, before we go on, I'm going to encourage you to press pause on the video right now and download the PDF that goes with this video, and it should be on this page, and probably print it out. In that PDF, there will be some tab that I'll be referring to for some lick examples when we talk about the licks. Plus, I really want you to think of this as a workshop, not a lesson. Okay, I'm going to ask you to join in and do some things right along with me. So you may also want to grab your guitar and maybe even a pencil because there's some fill in the blanks in the PDF, all right? So go ahead, I'll wait, push pause, and then come back. Okay, so I'm assuming you have guitar in hand. I'm assuming that you have at least got the PDF up on a screen, or perhaps you've even printed it out. So let's get into the 4 qualities of a lick. As you can see, the 4 qualities are when it starts. What beat does that lick start on? Is it in the middle of a bar? Is it a pickup to the next measure to come? Where does it start? When does it start? Number 2, when it ends. What beat specifically does it end on? Does the last note ring out such that it could be shortened if you needed it to? Know when the last note is struck, not just how long it rings out. Okay? Number 3, what chords are involved? Is the lick meant over the 1, the 4, or the 5, or a combination of chords? It's not always obvious, but you need to at least know, is it A7, is it B7, is it C7, right? We are going to be focusing on the blues, obviously, so we're going to stick to the 1, 4, and 5, the 3 primary chords found in a blues progression. Number 4, and probably most importantly for a lot of reasons, no, not most importantly, but very important for a lot of reasons, they all are, what scale or scales and pattern or patterns on your guitar is the lick from? In other words, is it a minor blues scale? Is it a major blues scale? Is it a Dorian mode? Is it a major scale? Is it a Mixolydian scale? Is it box 1? Is it box 4? Is it the house pattern, right? So, you have sort of the music related, like the scale, is it a minor pentatonic scale? And then you have the guitar related, like is it box 1 or box 2? Okay, now item 4 on that list is where your own study and your habits are going to come into play. If you don't see where the lick comes from by playing the notes in it, you may have to play around with it a bit and see if a pattern or scale comes into view for you. Try adding some more notes that sound good around it and see if that makes a difference. And we'll talk a little more about this as well. And the reason is because if, after playing with a lick for a few minutes, it's not clear where it comes from and how it's created, you'll probably want to abandon it because you'll have an extremely difficult time reusing it later. There are too many great sounds within your reach to focus really much time at all on a sound that you can't quite grasp right now. Okay, and finally, don't stress about being right when it comes to this. In many situations, there are at least 2 or 3 different ways to describe the same grouping of notes. Any of them will work. So use the one that makes the most sense to you and ignore the rest. Remember that this is for your benefit, not anyone else's. All right, so let's start with a simple blues lick that you might already know. If you've been through any of the Blues Guitar Unleashed solos, this will likely look familiar to you. It's lick 1 in your PDF. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Right, probably one you've heard before. Now, if we look at the tab for that lick, you can see in the tab that it starts on beat 2 and it ends on beat 2 of the following bar. Okay, now, so that kind of takes care of both when it starts and when it ends. As for the chords that it goes over, again, there's a C9, which is a C dominant type of chord. Remember that it could be C7, C9, C11, 13. They're all the same. And a G7 chord, which again could be any type of G dominant chord, and it would be fine. Okay, so those are the 2 chords that we have going on. Finally, what scale or scales and pattern or patterns does it use? Well, in this case, hopefully you can kind of see the good old 4-note solo pattern, right? Good old G minor pentatonic. If you can't see it, it also, by the way, could be the top of box 2. You can add some notes and it'll start to fill in. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about what to do if it's not immediately obvious here in a few minutes, so I won't get too carried away. One of the things, though, that we like to also look at here is how this lick might be used over other parts of the 12-bar blues progression. Okay, so we kind of want to prepare. We're thinking ahead, right? So we want to think about if this was the 4, if this was the 5, if this is the 1, how would it work, right? And we're going to get into this more in the next video, but for now, you can hopefully see that since these notes are all just G minor pentatonic scale, right? These chords are, the 2 chords are probably the 4 and the 1 in a 12-bar blues in G. Well, since we're only using the minor pentatonic scale, nothing would have to change. If we went to the 5 chord, or if we were on the 1 chord, nothing would have to change because you can use the minor pentatonic over any section of a 12-bar blues and it works. The minor pentatonic doesn't have to change for the whole form. If there was some major pentatonic involved, you would know that would have to be only over the 1 chord because the 4 and 5, the major pentatonic won't work. And we're going to have another example a little bit later on here that will demonstrate that. So keep in mind that we're going to talk in much more detail in the next video about how to use these licks and how to put the 4 qualities into practice. Right now, let's just make sure that you really understand them and you can find them on your own. Okay, so we have all the 4 qualities for the first lick. For the second lick, I chose one, which again is another lick found in one of the Blues Guitar Unleashed solos with ever so slightly different at the end, just because I was bored and wanted to change it. But let me show you two real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. All right, so again, if we look at the tab for this one, we can see that it starts on the and of one and ends on the and of one of the next bar. If you count it one and two and you might call it the This is a shuffle feel, right? But and or same thing in our case. As for chords, so we know when it starts, we know when it ends. Chords that it's being used over, it's only being used over an A7 chord. So that doesn't really tell us much about what's going on around it, but that's really okay. Keep in mind, keep in mind where you usually learn licks. Typically, it's, maybe from a course or a lesson, in which case you should be given enough information to put these 4 qualities to work for you. And if you're not given that information, you may want to find a new source of licks. You should always have that information. If somebody's teaching you a lick or you're stealing it from somewhere, you should be able to get that lick. If you were working out a lick by ear, then you'd certainly be able to hear the context of the lick, right? If you're learning one lick out of a solo, you're going to hear the whole solo. And if you simply listen to the lick go by and count the beats in the music, just mark when it starts and mark when it ends. You'll have when it starts and when it ends, right? And you'd have to be able to do that in order to transcribe a lick accurately anyway. You'd also be able to hear quite plainly which of the chords and the progression it's being used over, because again, you'd have access to the whole solo. And if you can't hear that or you can't pick it out, the lick wouldn't be of any use to you. So you'd want to move on and pick a different one anyhow. Okay, so keep in mind that the places where you generally get licks are you're going to have this information. So try not to worry about where would I get this. It should be there. Now the last quality of the second lick here is the scales and patterns that are involved. You can probably see it's good old box 1. A minor, pentatonic, box 1. But what if you couldn't see that? Okay? Like I kind of alluded to before, it's a little bit of a guess and check game. There isn't a perfect process for, magically seeing the scale patterns. But if you take a guess and you play more of the notes around the lick, so for example, in that lick, I have, these notes. So if I added, let's say that I thought maybe that was box 4. Right? That would probably throw you. That'd probably throw you for a loop. But if you then tried box 3, that would probably also throw you. And of course, if you tried box 1, then that would make sense. And you'd be surprised how conditioned your ear is to hearing the pentatonic scale. And a note out of place, it'll strike you as weird, and you'll hear it. And then, of course, you try a different pattern. But it is very much a guess and check sort of game. All right. So that's all 4 of the qualities of that second lick. Let's take a look at the third lick I grabbed for you today. Check it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, and notice that this one starts on the and of 4. It's a pickup into the bar, and it ends over a full bar later on the and of 2. It's being used over a D7 chord. That's it. All right, so we know when it starts, when it ends, and what chord it's going over. Lastly, it's mostly the D minor pentatonic scale, good old box 1, right? It goes right down the scale until we have that little half-step bend. And that's taking the minor sound and making it major. Now, as you may already know, the only place where you can use that major third like that is the 1 chord. So in this case, we know that it's in the key of D, as if you couldn't tell that already, but we know that it has to be used over the 1 chord. Now, that doesn't mean we can't use it over the 4 and 5. It just means we have to modify that half-step bend, probably by just holding the 10th fret note for the full beat instead of bending it. So instead of where we do that half step bend, we just hold it flat. hold it for the whole beat. 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. All right, so now we have all 4 of the qualities for that lick. Now, before I wrap this video up, this is really important. I want to give you 2 things to work on for next time. Because in the next video, we're going to cover something that's really powerful. And this is something that I've come up with called the 4 steps to mastery for a lick. Now, as I mentioned earlier, many people learn a lick, but they don't thoroughly assimilate it and make it a part of their vocabulary. And maybe this is a problem that you've also found. And then you wonder why on a jam session or over a jam track, those licks that you learned just don't seem to come out. You seem to always go back to the old stuff. So I'm going to show you a process in the next video for really taking these licks, taking them in and making them a part of your own blues vocabulary. But as you can imagine, these 4 qualities are required information when it comes to mastering a lick. That means the first thing I want you to do today is to open up any of the manuals to any courses you might have, whether it's mine or somebody else's, whether I made it or not. Just go through the manuals, pick out 10 licks from that manual, could be different manuals, go through in your mind and try to come up with the 4 qualities for each of the licks, of the 10 licks you come up with. You don't have to write it down, but you should be able to mentally come up with all 4 of the qualities for every single one of the licks you choose. Now, if you come up upon one that you just can't figure out, that's fine, pick a different one, no problem. And don't stress about being right. Just come up with an explanation that works for you and go with it. That's what's important. Now, after you've done that, I want you to take some time and memorize the 3 licks in the PDF that I had you download from today. Because we're going to use these licks again in the next video, and it's going to be important that you already have them under your fingers. However, how you memorize them is important, and that's what I want to talk to you about. I want you to take the lick, and you now know where it starts, what beat, right? I'm going to use the first lick, which starts on beat 2, and I'll show you. And where it ends, which for this lick is also beat 2. And what I'm going to do is you're going to count out loud. I know, count out loud, slowly at first, and then you can pick up the pace as you feel comfortable, and play the lick every time you get to the starting count. And of course, when you get to the ending count, double check to make sure you're at the end of your lick. Make sure that you didn't get messed up in the middle. Okay? So to demonstrate, I'm going to count, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so on and so forth. And every time I get to a 2, it'll be time to start my lick again, right? Now, of course, at the next 2, I should be just finishing the lick, so I can't start it again, and I'll have to count the space until the next time. But don't shortcut this step. Do it for each of the licks over and over until you can do it easily and without thinking about it. My benchmark for this is, can I talk to my wife about what we're having for dinner while I play the lick? If I can, I have it. If I can't concentrate on either the conversation with my wife or the lick, then I don't have it down yet. Okay? So, as I said, let me demonstrate this for lick 1. It'll look like this. So first I'm going to count myself in, and then as soon as I come to the first 2 after I've counted myself in, I'll start playing. And I'm going to start out nice and slowly, and then I'll slowly speed up as we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And now at this point I can pretty much do it while I keep talking to you. 4 a 1 a 2 a 3. So this should be really comfortable. And you can just keep going and kind of keep going. And not stop, just keep on playing. It should be nice and memorized and comfortable. 1, 2. All right, so at that point, you've got it. I don't know if it's going to take 4 times through. I don't know if it's going to take 40 times through. Just keep going nice and slow. If you start to speed up and then you start making mistakes, just slow back down. Just keep going. The trick is to get it memorized and get it to your fingers. It's got to travel down to the fingers, get out of the head and to the fingers, okay? Now for lick number 2 with those triplets in it, I would count it like this. Let me just demonstrate this on lick 2 because of the triplets. Here we go. And again, I'll count myself in first. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and by this point it's coming pretty good for me, but I've been playing this for a while, so it's probably going to take you a few more tries. 3, 4, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3, 4, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3, 4, 1, 2 and 3 and 1 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And then for lick 3, if I were to do the same thing for that, it should go something like this. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 3, and 4. Notice that I'm not using a metronome. Notice that I'm counting out loud. That's because the metronome is not going to give you time. You have to count 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and plus I can speed up. And 4. Now you may only have to play it a few times if you're familiar with these licks already. You may have to play it 100 times. I don't know, and you won't either until you try it. Okay? But try to do that at least 2 or 3 times. Do it in various sessions today, because let's say you do one of these licks and you do it for a couple minutes and you get it memorized and it's like, cool, okay. If you come back to it tomorrow, it'll be gone. But if you do it again later today, it might actually stick. It's just the way our brains work, okay? But if you can do that a couple of times today, you'll be very ready for tomorrow's video, where we'll dive a lot more into how to make these licks part of your own vocabulary. Okay, so until then, practice and have fun with it, and take care. I will talk to you soon.